Hello and welcome to the Ask Me Anything live stream in place of my usual Fiddler's Green podcast. I am going to be doing a Ask Me Anything tonight. So there aren't that many questions yet. I guess the long story or the short story behind this stream is I just didn't have enough time to put together a lecture this last weekend. I was incredibly pressed for time since I was working for one day during the I guess this doesn't sound I had to work a day during the week. People in the service industry doesn't sound very bad at all, but you lose a Sunday and all of a sudden everything just feels really, really behind. So I decided that since I really wanted to keep the pattern of always streaming at around 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I would just do an Ask Me Anything and talk about whatever topics people wanted to put in my chat. So if we're going live and everything's working properly, I should be broadcasting on YouTube as well as on YouTube or sorry, on Twitter/X as well as on YouTube. You can tell I've gotten very little sleep. It's just the kid. I mean, he has very, very difficult time sleeping through the night. And I was up, I think I got like 3 hours of sleep last night collectively. And I just got off of work and just examining what I want to do for this stream and trying to figure out something to talk about. Obviously, we've got a bunch of fake news stories. I'm not on Twitter. There's another problem too. When you're not on Twitter, because of Len, all of the easy, low hanging fruit, like comment on this issue everyone's talking about, that's immediately off the table. I have no idea what people are talking about right now, other than the usual stuff they talk about. I have a vague sense. I watch some YouTube channel like LP on iHypocrite for his daily cope, and I get a general sense about what people are talking about. But a lot of that, some of it's just like the debate stream stuff, which I still kind of like debates a little bit, but I might talk about that as well. Just kind of, I mean, I feel like I talk about that all the time, just how much that's just degraded. And but you get the sense of like the drama that's going on. That's what everyone always wants to hear about. That's what everyone always tunes in to hear me talk about at length, is just various ongoing pieces of drama, because the current events are all the same. Like the astronauts got back from the space station. They're doing a release of the JFK files, which will probably be a nothing burger, as we Americans say, even we Americans who live in Canada. And I don't know, just general politics stuff that's been going on forever. Obviously, what everyone's really angry about that I caught wind of on Substack was the captive dreamer doxing and cancellation that went on. And I can't remember exactly who started the doxing. I don't even know what the dox was, and I'm not going to repeat it here. But it's like the typical Christian thing where a guy shit posts anti-Semitic and racist stuff online, and that's bad. But as opposed to being reprimanded privately, his parents, his church, they come out and denounce the guy publicly, which just looks, I mean, it looks incredibly weak. I mean, I understand that this guy, Captive Dreamers, I guess this guy was his father or some relation. He was a pastor or he was a public relations professional for some body of Christians. And because of that, he needed to make a statement, or he was pressured to make a statement. But you have this thing where a member of your community has been doxxed, perhaps because of his own, I don't want to say stupidity, but carelessness. You have a bunch of behaviors come to the fore that are not Christian. They're sort of not befitting a Christian gentleman, as I like saying. They're untowards behaviors. Most of them are profanity. And but at the same time, it's very common online. And what happens immediately is this huge performance art that is conservative TM, conservative big con, big Eva, coming out and doing this little apology tour like it's 2019 again, and everyone just has to kind of bow to the leftist sensibilities. If he was doxxed as being gay, if this guy was outed as being gay, just like give, if you're having a hard time figuring out what's so jarring about this, even though the behavior is technically against Christian norms, if this guy's son was outed using private messages as being gay, would this president of a conservative Christian organization go on and say how he denounced him, how he had no knowledge of this? This is, completely, he completely denounced it at all levels. Would that have gone on if it had been a violation of Christian norms that didn't fall out of the norms of the mainstream? Of course not. So no one's under any illusions that this kind of retraction and denunciation of shit posters online is being driven by Christian ethics. It's being driven only to the extent that the Christian ethics intersect with the sensibilities of the mainstream. And and I guess I think people were really angry at people like Richard Hanania, who once more like piled on and tried to ingratiate himself with the lead opinion, talking about how justified the docs was, this was a long time coming, how we need to stand up against exclusion and bigotry. And this is a guy who's made his name, or originally made his name, trying to mainstream ideas that were broadly denounced as racist. Now all he does on Twitter is pile on these kind of cancellation campaigns. And you know, I mean, it's disgusting. And Richard Hanania is just a disgusting. Is it Hanania? I think it's Hanania. Richard Hanania is just a disgusting individual. But it just gets to the point where at what it's like James Lindsay too. Like James Lindsay is just an absolute. I understand that 10 years ago, James Lindsay did something that was kind of cool. And I understand that Richard Hanania 5 years ago had some interesting blog posts, but these guys are years away from any productive insight they've ever had. They've contradicted themselves every which way, up, down, and backwards. They do everything in their power just to, again, ingratiate themselves with the mainstream. Uh, this is again, I don't exactly know what to say. I mean, there comes a point where, and, like nothing I'm going to say about Hanania or James Lindsay. James Lindsay talking about how random people in the right wing online sphere that are my friends are secret demon worshippers or secret Zoroastrian Gnostics. I mean, this is kooky, crazy stuff, and at some point when you get to a place with these people like Hanani, and they'll also, I should also mention, they refuse to engage with their critics ever. They refuse to engage with their critics. They hop on cancellation campaigns. They defame people and defame people in kind of ridiculous, brutal ways online. And then they also just have a completely they're either sort of factually insane like James Lindsay, or their worldview is just like deeply incoherent. It just like it's a cobbled together group of contradictions that exist to kind of make themselves look cool. And I guess this is sort of like the number one thing with me. Like this is immediately will get you on. I guess this is probably a more minor thing. But whenever I get the sense that an intellectual is trying to join the winning team, I immediately tap out. An intellectual's job is not to join the winning, I mean, a public intellectual. I hate using the word intellectual. Anytime a pundit or anytime a writer or anytime a person who's paid for ideas looks like he is pitching his ideas so he can ingratiate himself to power, that person is useless as a thinker, as a public intellectual, as a writer, as someone who deals in ideas. And what sort of amazed me is just how much people have kind of walked into this elite human capital thing. They don't care that their ideas have contradictions. They just want to be seen as the people who are on the inside of the Silicon Valley elite, blah 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 blah. And it's really absolutely disgusting. And like I said before, there comes a time with these thinkers where it, everything that's said about them has been said, and it just starts being a question of their fans. I mean, who's still paying attention to people? I know people who are still James Lindsay fans, and I hate to say this, but it kind of makes me wonder what they're thinking. And like, it makes me. This sounds kind of petty, but their continued support of people like Kanania and Lindsay makes me think that they're completely out of touch, or they haven't understood the realities of the situation that we're in, or maybe in the worst case scenario that they approve of this behavior. And I don't know what to say. There comes a point when following these kind of luminaries and supporting them kind of becomes a black mark even on the people who kind of aren't them, but are following and supporting them. I don't want to kind of be like reverse cancellation, but I have to say at some point I look at people who are like propping up Richard Hanania, and I think to myself, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, are you trying to do this whole we're gonna join with power by becoming incoherent intellectually? Are you trying to do this whole kind of like Uno reverso, outflank the right from the right type of ridiculous, petty high school trick? If that's the case, I don't really want to have any part of this project. The idea of all of these things is to kind of create an understanding and space for exchanging ideas, and actually coming to a meaningful conversation about something. So guys, there is an entropy chat in the well, it's pinned in the YouTube channel, and it should be the reply on Twitter. This is the service that I use currently for super chats. So if you want me to answer a question on that front, there's always that one. There's You can always ask me a question there. I'll just keep on rambling about various different topics. I did say I have had done a Twitter space. The idea again was every third Sunday I was going to do a community roundtable on Twitter/X concerning uh, basically. What I really want people to do is I really want people to come on my channel, and we'll discuss what has worked and what has not worked with our attempts to get people operating in real life, running events, having business contacts, getting employment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this last one was really good. I didn't hit record on this. I thought that spaces were sort of recorded by default, but I learned too late that you actually have to set it up as a recording for the space to get recorded. So I'll know that in the future. Then I'll have that down. But we had a variety of good people come on and talk about their experiences with community building. Certainly, the thing that I learned about this, obviously, we have the basket weaving group if you're interested in making contact with people locally who are in our sphere, so to speak. But I think what people were kind of focusing on were the areas that were still not dominated by the mainstream, the pieces of community that had kind of a necessary right wing component to them. And the best example of this was farmers markets, which I thought was a very, very interesting idea and something that I want to explore more. It's kind of the perfect storm of places that are necessarily right wing, farmers being naturally a very right wing group, and it's combined with kind of like an art hippie aesthetic, with a kind of foodie aesthetic, and it would be a great place to kind of, well, first of all, organize our own versions of farmers markets, which is fairly easy to do, at least according to a person who's apparently done it before. You just need, the cooperation of a church community, and then also just use it as a general networking area for whatever you want, for people who are distributing art, or people who are talking about ideas or having conversations, who are organizing for politics. This would be a great it's an area of exploration that's very fertile ground for expansion. Another area might be like maker spaces as well. And then I had a variety of people, a few young guys coming on talking about their own, uh, you know, I think a lot of times younger people, they know what they want, they just don't know, like, what the barriers are to get it. So, one request was something like, "How do we get skills passed down from the older generations?" Well, I mean, that's all now that's a very I hear a lot of people talking about wanting that. The problem is a lot of these, like, hard to learn skills that the older generations have that we don't, like ham radio operation or welding. These things take practice. They take an ability to stick with it for many years, and they also require old people to teach them. The opportunity cost, the people who are in the ideal mentorship phase of their lives are people who are in their 60s, aka boomers, or maybe 70s even. And the thing is that with our community building efforts so far, the boomers have kind of disappeared from public life as far as I've seen after COVID. COVID was they just kind of retreated into themselves after COVID. And to the extent that they're back, they're only really participating in the mainstream and mostly just trying to, suck the marrow out of their later years with as little thought for what will come after them as possible. And all thought about what will come after them is just constantly delegated to the government. Um Someone's asking me about Ivan Illich. I don't remember. I think I've read something by Ivan Illich, but I can't remember what it was. So you're asking the wrong question. If you wanted to just ask me a random question to happen to see it, you can tag me on Twitter, or I'm technically off of Twitter for Lent, but when I do live streams and people, you can tag me on Twitter. I'll see it because I have the tab open necessarily right now. And also, obviously, if you at reply me in my in my YouTube comments, I'll see it then. Other than that, I will give longer answers if you want to throw me a donation on Entropy. So there's that. I don't know. Any other questions? Have you seen something that's happening in the Reform UK? I'm happy that this is happening. Well, I've heard that Nigel Farage has kind of sold out. I don't exactly know why. I have kind of studiously avoided British politics, so there's that. People are asking me if I feel like I already gave my opinion on the Captive Dreamer docs. Everyone's talking about that. I mean, what is there to talk about? Someone got doxed through unethical means, and apparently his real life community threw him under the bus. And then you have pieces of shit like Richard Hanania follow in and dogpile it. I don't know what to say, right? I mean, this really is a question for the people, for the right wingers who are still in Hanania's circle. What they make of this, like, how is this acceptable? It's really a question for them. It's not a question for those of us who Richard Hanania likes bashing online. Not that I'm on X for the next several weeks, but it's just, are you comfortable with this? Are you comfortable with this? And I'm writing a little bit of a think piece on just again, my favorite topic, the death of discourse, and all the things we've seen. And that's in addition to finishing up the third part of my mega essay, The Blessings of Babel, which is longer. And I haven't had as much time this week for writing as I would have ideally liked to have. But the big problem with the big problem with all of these things is the conversation's more or less played out, and so you have people kind of engaging in politics, and I don't want to sound like egotistical or solipsistic or like I think my ideology just has the truth, but every time I see a thinker engage with right wing ideas, they just get completely destroyed and end up humiliating themselves. This has happened several times in the last week. Uh, the one that everyone was talking about last week was the Sam Cedar Jubilee thing. Now, I mean, Jubilee is this debate show. It kind of reminds me of Internet Blood Sports, but they've got like all these gimmicks. And the gimmick that they're on now is that they have one like professional debater against 25 amateurs from the opposition. So, excuse me, I was sneezing. Um, so, I mean, it's designed to make it look like, I mean, the whole concept of the Jubilee 25 versus 1 is stupid from the get-go, because anyone who did debate in high school would know that even if the two sides were completely equal in terms of their competence at debating a subject, the person who's in the hot seat has the advantage because he can trace a constant narrative through the debate, whereas everyone else is playing like a relay game. Like they can't keep a story straight because they're constantly getting swapped in and swapped out every 5 minutes. Plus, being the guy who defeats 25 other guys in a ring makes you look really badass. So you don't even really have to be very good of a debater, and you can end up looking really, really good. So it naturally benefit, and then that also, in addition to that kind of natural dynamic where you want to be the one person who can keep a story straight rather than one of the 25 people who gets a 5 minute slot at actually debating you. There's the additional dynamic that the person who's in the hot seat is a professional debater. They've studied the issues in advance, and the most important thing, the number one most important thing for all debates, is they control the frame, aka they control the questions that are asked. So when the Jubilee thing goes up, it's always like the conversation starts with a prompt that is selected by the person who's in the hot seat. So they control the frame, and once you control the frame and you have the ability to create a narrative, you have to really fuck up to lose a debate. But wouldn't you know it, Sam Cedar did do this. Sam Cedar is this, he's a socialist, communist guy from the Majority Report. And if you've watched this guy for a long time, you'll know that Sam Cedar thinks that he's hot shit at debate. And he had this whole thing for years about how Steven Crowder was afraid to debate him. I don't know. I was never a Steven Crowder fan. I always thought he was kind of a creep. And I don't want to sound petty again, but his marital difficulties kind of confirmed me in that belief that this guy was kind of a creep. And I kind of stopped paying attention to him after 2017 and never looked back. I never had to because he never was doing anything that was that interesting. And maybe Steven Crowder even a debater? I don't know. But for whatever reason, Sam Cedar got it in his head that he had all of the conservatives running. And he's been playing this card for like 5 years of this insufferable, a guy that does not regularly debate right wingers, convinced that he is God's gift to. I mean, it's not even like Destiny, where Destiny has like the most dishonest conversational style imaginable. But at least he has interactions in a contentious environment. To my knowledge, Sam Cedar just has a bunch of people who are telling him he's good at debate, and that's it. That's. But he's talked himself into believing that he's just this guy who has all the answers and has all of the ways to defeat the conservatives. And I mean, he gets on this program, Jubilee, and of course, like again, there's always a few of the Jubilee people. These are amateurs, right? So there's a few of them that just don't have their shit together. They're kind of crackpots or kooks, and or they're really behind the times, or they're just there to boost their public media profile. And obviously he can has a very easy time defeating them. But what's really apparent with the debate is he hasn't updated his understanding of conservative ideology since Trump. He's still talking about like Mitt Romney stuff. He still has this understanding of conservatives as being variations of Reagan Republicans, maybe with a little more populism. And he also has this idea that just by like repeating people's ideas and saying, "Ooh, this is a bad look. Oh my God, are you sure about that? Wow, sheesh, this isn't that good." I'm like, he had all this thing, like the presumed progressive audience in charge of all of this, like all of the progressive debate tactics presume that you're sitting around playing to an audience of pre-existing progressives, and they're watching you and cheering you on from the sidelines. And uh sh- I mean, yeah, okay. That's but you wouldn't think that if you had actual experience in debates, because as the famous Mike Tyson quote goes, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the nose. Once you get into a contentious debate environment, you kind of feel how, okay, well, how this plays out in my head is not how debates play out in real life. And because, your opponent is a living creature, they adapt. When you use an argument against them, they will have a response. Like all ideologies have answers to all questions. Sometimes they're not particularly good answers, and that's obviously why the framing of a debate is the most powerful thing in existence. The framing of the debate controls the debate, because the framing of the debate essentially gates what questions are legitimate or what questions are not legitimate. And if you choose the frame to exclude the questions that your side has a difficult time answering, then you're going to have a very, very easy time with the debate or with the conversation. And so so sure enough, but Sam Cedar and indeed all progressives, they seem to have cut their teeth debating inside either progressive Discord servers, progressive podcasts that invite random amateur guests over where the audience is with them, or college classrooms where they could just appeal to the morality of progressivism, and and the the debates is given to them. That's why all of the progressive debate tactics are kind of like a smirk and a shrug and an appeal to a presumed progressive audience that's sitting in the wings, that's going to socially shame the person who just transgressed your progressive norms into submission. And they're not really concerned about exposing a contradiction or a factual error. They're concerned with trying to brush the conversation or the various contentious points into a progressive thought crime. So, I mean, the first example is this blonde girl who comes on and says, I think there was the frame was something about how xenophobic nationalism is a problem. And, it's obviously the frame is he wants Republicans to come on and go like, oh, gee, man, I don't think Republicans aren't racist. Democrats are the real racists. Oh, gee, I don't think Trump is racist. What did Trump ever do that was racist? Like, that's what he's inviting. He's inviting Republicans to come on and defend themselves against the accusation of racism, which is that, once you do that, you have lost, because you can change the definition of racism to make it so that the person is always racist. And then, since the word racism is more or less imaginary, right? It was invented 100 years ago by that progressive Christian guy, Pratt. And then it was really invented like in the meaningful way that we use it now by communists, by Trotskyists. And so it's an imaginary word designed to characterize huge swaths of conservative, right-wing, and traditional views as unacceptable inside a progressive debate. So it's, once you get into, oh, I'm not racist. What do you mean I'm racist? Well, that's easy. Like progressives have learned how to demonstrate how every single idea that conservatives have is racist in one way, shape, or form. And so it's the easiest frame imaginable. But what Sam Sater doesn't expect is what everyone has been saying for the last 5 years, who hasn't had their head in a hole. And that is like, this is why, debating against living things is harder than debating against chatbots or debating against cartoon characters that you have in your head, or your boomer relatives that don't update their understandings of the universe as they experience new facts. And so, of course, what happens to Sam Cedar in this environment? Well, Sam Cedar encounters what every single person with a pulse who's on the left has encountered in the last 5 years, but for some reason he hasn't. An attractive professional girl sits down on the stage and says, I think xenophobic nationalism's a good thing. Prove me wrong. And Sam Seder's like, da, ba, 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 ba. America wasn't always like, are you saying you get to define the identity of America? And she's like, no, it's always been white and Christian. That's how it's been. And it's been understood to be that way since, at least up until the 60s. And then after he does that, after she owns the fact that she wants the country to have a European culture and be Christian in its character, like the founding fathers wanted. What does he say? Oh, that's not a good look. Well, not a good look. What do you mean? She's surrounded by 25 other conservatives. You're not in a college classroom, Sam. Oh my God, I guess that's what Trump voters believe. I guess we just have irreconcilable differences. Her blah 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 throws up his hands, has nothing to say. Yeah. Okay, like so if that's the position, that's not a debate. That's just you kind of scoffing and making a soy face at your opponent's devout beliefs. And it's all. I mean, it's performative because he's asking this question so he can clip it from his audience, and his audience thinks that saying I believe that America is a Christian country or America is a country that has an inherently European culture to it, they think that that is a victory condition. And so that's like the clip for them. So the debate is run to get those clips and to get that kind of applause, but that's not a debate. And the fact that he wasn't expecting this is because it didn't. I mean, usually the way this works, the way this makes like a good entertainment product for the progressives is I'm rambling to let the ask me anything questions build up in entropy and so on and so forth. The reason why this whole dynamic with ethno-nationalism and racism, what makes it such a good like dynamic is the person comes on and they say like, oh, I'm not racist, or there's an implicit understanding that they're not racist. And then through one of their admissions, you reveal that they're racist, or you reveal that they're a nationalist, or you reveal that they think America is a European country or something like that, or a Christian country. Oh my God, scandal, you've been exposed. It's the expose, that's the clip. It's been established, you've done something. If the person comes on and is like, oh, hey, I am a nationalist and I'm a Christian and I believe America should have a Christian European culture. Like there's something to expose. That's it. And the entertainment product is ruined. The stigma, the implicit stigma that comes from hiding your power level is gone. And this is why the whole game works. This is why the Joel Berry prove that you're less racist than the left wing is ridiculous. It allows the progressives to use their entertainment product to its full effect, whereas just owning your nationalism and owning the love of your own people and owning your own religious faith it robs it. Sam Seder didn't even get a clip out of that because he wasn't expecting someone to just come up and own it immediately. But how? Like, how was he not aware of this? And I mean, that's the question is not, why this failed. I mean, I've seen this fail 1,000 times. I guess the only person who doesn't understand why this works is probably Joel Berry or Neil Shenvi or Local Distance. Like that crowd is the only people in the country who don't understand how this works. But okay, fair enough. Maybe he just hasn't updated his priors since 2019. He's not aware that the right has essentially a postmodern frame, or alternatively, that the right has just essentially owned its priors, which is a better way to think about it. Rather than being postmodern, you just reject modernity and accept the fact that you as a right-winger have a pre-modern conception of the world, which is correct because modernity is where the contradictions come in. The 20th century is where the contradictions of the Enlightenment become apparent. And the way the leftists win is making you co-owners of those contradictions and mistakes. Okay, fair enough. Maybe Sam Seder, he has a podcast. He convinced himself he was a debate master in 2020, and he just wasn't in the game for the last 3 years when this stuff became more popular. But then I don't know if this was before or after because I just watched the individual clips, or I guess I watched some of the debate. Then afterwards, this guy comes on and starts asking questions about objective morality and moral basis, and whether consent can be the only standard of the good when it comes to morality. Um, so he walks Sam Seder through this line of questioning about objective morality and about the basis of law and how it is not just a preference, but a moral law. And every right winger who's watching, every conservative who's watching, this is not like William Lane Craig has been doing this for 20 years. C.S. Lewis was, he mastered this form in the 50s. There's been variations of this going on since Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, and in their very archaic forms. But by the time it rolls around to even 2013, like this is a formula. This is a series of questions. Oh, you say that religious fundamentalism can't be let into law, but what's the basis for your morality? It's either a preference or it is a religion or an ideology. And, there's a problem there because there really isn't a difference between a religion and an ideology, other than the fact that, the modernity says that ideology is good and religion is bad. And that's no one's buying that anymore because it's fairly obvious that whatever ideology leftists has is functionally a religion. And of course, what does Sam Seder do? Well, it's not a preference. It's just about consent and personal choice. It's just about what we decide as a collective democracy. And one by one, you just go through the list. Well, if everyone decided that it was you should be executed for being gay, would you agree? And oh no, I wouldn't agree to that. Oh, if it's just personal choice, if it's just personal choice, then what about incest? Or what about all of these other things, right? What about pedophilia and all this stuff? All of the standard questions about sexual morality have these like very, very easy follow-up questions. And it's fine. I know that this is one of those line of questionings that progressives have very bad answers for, even in the Steel Man. If a master progressive debater came on and I was able to get into that frame of debating the substance of objective morality, comparatively, not absolutely, because if it's absolute, they'll just demand that you provide an increasing level of proof for all your moral axioms and then scoff at you with the view from nowhere. Uh, as long as it's in a comparative frame, the progressive answers or the liberal answers for these things are absolute dog shit. And again, they have been for hundreds of years. Uh, So Sam accepts that frame, walks into it, and then gets walked down a line of questioning that, again, every person who's been in a conservative circle knows by heart. Every conservative or right winger who was watching it was literally asking the questions before the guy debating Sam Seder was, and he just bombs out on all of them. He gets caught in a logical contradiction. He ends up asserting that it's just that worldviews that are religious just need to be excluded because he doesn't like them, and and then he throws his hands up and says, "Well, we have this irreconcilable difference." Okay, so why do you rule, Sam? Why isn't Christian fundamentalism good if it's just another ideology or just another moral system? No answer, and it's all of this stuff. I mean. And I think I did a debate on break the rules. What was that, a few days ago? Was that Thursday? I can't remember anymore. But maybe it was Friday. I think it was Thursday actually. I did a debate with this guy, River Sage, about does the right go too far? Again, like standard conservative argument. So this guy is a liberal moderate associated with Barry Weiss, and again, like I'm just giving him the standard, like Christian conservative apologetics, the standard right wing arguments for this stuff. Just taps out, can't answer any questions. ends up just kind of waving his hand at the issue of collective concerns, and then like weirdly threatening me with like a backlash. Like everyone's going to have a backlash against you. Well, I don't care about popular opinion because I know that I'm right. And I know from the past that what eventually is considered right changes. So I'm committed in my beliefs. I'm committed in teaching them and advancing them. So after that, what like well were people convinced about gay marriage? Was the backlash against gay marriage, did that convince anyone to abandon their beliefs on that? No, of course not. Uh, Completely taps out. It's just I mean, really, if Lev wasn't there to go on digressions, the conversation would have lasted 25 minutes because it would just be an appeal to to kind of uh to kind of popularity and again like this presumed audience that has their back and no conviction either. There's very little conviction on the progressive side. And I don't know, I'm just kind of I guess the piece I'm working on just gonna overview. I'm just kind of tired of this. We'll be doing this for a while, I guess. It feels embarrassing on the part of the left. There's no energy, and there's no real belief. I've never been more convinced of the rightness of these propositions. Uh, and I don't feel challenged. And it's just a matter of all of these people just not being aware of a certain number of ideas that they really should have been aware of at this time. Um, okay, finally, I've got some super chats I can go over, but well, maybe I'll give a few more minutes. Trump won. Well, I mean, that's obviously this is one good point that River Page is such a strange name. I think I would have guessed that he was gay even if he hadn't told me as part of the debate. But yeah, it's obviously a pseudonym. But who'd want to be River Page? It's like it sounds like a My Little Pony name. Like I'm Rainbow Sparkles or I'm Lickety Splits. I'm River Page. Okay, fine. It's um no, but I guess conversely, the issue is that the right wing has got very little to do other than kind of to gloat, and gloating is a very bad practice. It doesn't really accomplish anything, and it just kind of it makes your enemies stronger and more unified in their concept of what you're not. I mean, that's what Richard Hanania is. I mean, if there was any justice in this world, Richard Hanania would have totally destroyed his reputation by now. No, he must have some kind of big pocket donor behind him that's kind of keeping him going for all this time. But uh, the gloating and the sadism and the cowardice and the contradictions, don't be like that person. I know that Trump won, and it's time to flex on our enemies. No, it's not. It's time. It's time to figure out what you actually have. Like, what can you actually? So we've been complaining about cancel culture for years. We've been complaining about woke culture for years and how it's held us back. Well, now woke culture and cancel culture is, I mean, if you're not captive dreamer, it's in recession. Or weirdly enough, it's in recession. Cancel culture is in recession everywhere, except apparently for conservative Christian circles, which are keeping it going, fulfilling their time honored tradition of always being 10 years behind what everyone else is doing at all times. And but if you're not in an evangelical circle, cancellation culture is over. What are you personally doing? I hear there's talk about war with Iran. I mean, here's the thing: like, we cannot control this. I pray that we have peace in Ukraine, and then afterwards, I pray that there can be some kind of ceasefire arrangement worked out between Israel and Iran and Gaza. But I mean, the Trump administration is surrounded by these insane warmongers. I thought I had hoped that getting rid of John Bolton would have stopped these people, but it's very, very obvious that Benjamin Netanyahu wants a war with Iran, and it's unclear what where this is ultimately going to lead. I don't think it's going to be, I think what's probably going to happen, or what the most that would likely happen, is kind of like bombing or something like that, or a surgical strike, what have you. But war with Iran is, I don't know. We can't control it. It's the thing is I'm more aware than ever at my sort of sphere of control and influence, and what I can do and what I can't do. I think we really have an opportunity in this moment to mold conservative and right wing culture. We have an opportunity in this moment to really show people a different way of approaching non progressive, uh, just a non progressive lifestyle and worldview. We have an opportunity to model what that would mean in public for the first time in a long time. And I want to make sure that and I know everyone is atomized. I know that, you can't just kill all social life and then just pick it up again. But everyone needs to be kind of rebuilding this. This is how I started off my conversation on the weekly roundtable on community building that I have every third Sunday. So, mark your calendars. I'll have it every third Sunday. And if you want to come on, you have to message me. I know I'm not on Twitter other than the nights that I'm broadcasting in podcast form on X, Twitter X. But, the idea is to get people talking about what their projects are so that we can all help them and copy their best ideas, their best learnings for community building, and for not like community building sounds like, oh wow, I have a community center for right wingers. All I mean is art projects and political parties and church groups and farmers markets and builder spaces. And then ultimately, and I think we're I mean, in some sense, we've already created something like this through the OGC, fraternal societies and larger organizations that consolidate elite groups of people that can actually put pressure on various avenues of power. That is the future for this. That is the product. That is our sphere of control right now. And like, there's a lot of stuff out there. It's just not plugged in properly. The biggest issue is the organizational dimension of things. I don't see any chat. I mean, this is, to kind of go on my rant a little bit more. And this is what people like talking about, people who have absolutely no ideas and who are very much like Richard Hanania, Noah Smith. These people kind of like, they understand that there is a vibe shift. They understand that politics isn't going to work the same way it did in times past. And their response is, oh, well, the reaction is going to be transient because they're not building anything. And part of this is a fundamental misunderstanding about what has happened. What has happened in the vibe shift has been much more liberalism dying than in any coherent opposition coming in to replace it. But that being said, the challenge that Noah Smith kind of dishonestly puts in front of us, his challenge is dishonest, but the Steelman version of it is very honest, which is, okay, sure, your enemy is in the process of dying. Now is your time to kind of take this forward and show people what you can actually build. All right, all right. Okay, now I feel comfortable moving to the actual the actual subjects here. Okay, perfect. And you can tell that I'm really tired. This is me on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. First question of the night. Papagai Toucher for $25. He says, hello, Dave. Previously, you said that Trump Putin Ukraine situation should be used to deal with European technocrats. There is even talk about a US Russia alliance in some right wing circles. Won't this cause European right wingers to rally around their government despite how much they may oppose their migration policy, etc.? Thank you. Well, I mean, okay, so there's a reason why I find these international questions so insufferable. I mean, not insufferable, but I find talking about them with people who are not in our circles, as kind of ridiculous. And not saying your question is stupid, Papa Guy. It's a very good question, but when we say like U.S. alliances and European alliances, these are not like monoliths. I mean, perhaps China is, and perhaps Russia is to a certain extent. Those are much more monolithic entities, but in the present world, the West, by that I mean the United States and Canada and Europe, these are highly schizophrenic entities. These are highly schizophrenic. These are highly schizophrenic, divided, uh, 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 sclerotic institutions. Uh, there are multiple parties operating inside of them, and just to pick out a few of them, this whole vibe shift, this whole realignment is being brought on by a United States ruling class that is no longer solidly in control of the government. The government that was FDR's government that has ruled the United States in a variety of forms since the 30s has now shown itself to be very weak. And while the Trump does not appear to be powerful enough to completely replace it with his own version of the government, and it's hard to see how Trumpism could merge with the deep state of FDR that FDR left behind. It's revealing that the international alliance structure is fractured because European governments have an alliance with Blue America, aka the New Deal deep state America. They do not have an alliance with Red State America. They do not have an alliance with the plebs of America or the military elites or the former military elites of America, even if they rely on our security assurances. Uh, they do not have so Canada and Europe are picking fights with America, not because they have some pretense to actually have an international fight with them, but because they are hoping that America is going to turn around and become blue again permanently. They're banking on the fact that they think that the Trump revolution is going to fail. And that's why they're picking fights with America. If the Trump revolution were to succeed, and I think it's still very far away from doing that, if it were to completely destroy the government of FDR, such that there was a complete government reset, and now the United States is, for all foreseeable futures, solidly Trumpian in its outlook, the Europe would immediately bend a knee. Europe has no chance against a United States and Russian alliance. There's problems with that. And into that, like that's Alexander Dugin's dream is the Russian, the U.S. Russian alliance against, I don't know, Europe against China, who knows? But the the whole the whole thing, the whole idea of Europe independently militaristically pushing back against either Russia or the United States, not to mention both of them, is nuts. They have no army. They have no army. They have no youth energy. They have very few independent industries that can stand up to a trade war with the outside world. They're largely dependent on things like they're not large. They are a larger part of their economies comes from things like tourism and by international trade arbitrage and all this stuff. And once that financial system goes the way that the way of the dodo, and if once they're, for instance, punished in the same way that we punish Russia, these governments will be completely bankrupt. And furthermore, like America, Europe is in this huge identity crisis where it is being challenged by interior nationalist entities that want to uproot that government and replace it with their own style of governments themselves. And I mean, if I were Trump, the big question right now is not. I mean, look, I don't think Putin's going anywhere. I don't even think Iran is going anywhere. I don't think Israel is going anywhere. But the big question right now is who rules Western Europe and who rules North America. Like that is the big question. That's what actually is up in the air. And after we determine that, then we can determine who the alliance is with. But who rules North America and who rules Europe is the number one question. That is what's up in the air. Because if the government of the United States actually is replaced by a new Trumpian government, then all alliances will probably flip around and change. Similarly, if Trump is unsuccessful, but in the interim 4 years, nationalist parties take over Europe, that could be the beginning of the end of United States soft power and the beginning of the end of FDR's government in the West. I think it will cascade backwards in that. I mean, they really need both Europe and America to maintain power. So they need to keep the nationalists out of power in Europe, and then they need to displace Trump in a coup or in a big electoral turnaround, and then immediately lock down the system so that this cannot happen again. And maybe they'll do it, but that's what all the governments in Europe are banking on. And if we're back, if we go blue, then the alliances will pretty much stay where they are. If there's a new government in America or Europe, then all bets are off the table. But the elites are currently banking on the fact that Trump will fail, and yeah, the die is cast. We'll see what will happen, right? Although I hope that helps, right? I mean, Europe is not like Europe in the future. Like if you were to take the populations of Europe and give them a hard reboot and make it so that they could reconceptualize themselves economically and demographically and religiously, such that you have like a really energetic population with its own industry and a vision for the future. In that case, a unified Western Europe could push back against Russia and America. In the current form and for the foreseeable future, that cannot possibly happen. And when you see bureaucrats trying to push back against Trump, they're really trying to ingratiate themselves against the government that will come after Trump because they think that Trump is temporary. If they get the sense that someone like Trump is permanent, they would not be doing this because they're losing a lot of money. They stand to be losing a lot. They're not going to fight Putin on the front lines. And if they did fight Putin on the front lines with their own troops, their governments would be over because their political formula, their reason for ruling, the story that they tell people about themselves, which is the most important part of the political formula. Sometimes your story of power is used interchangeably with the verb political formula, but their political formula, their story about why they rule, is contingent on the First World War and a big bloodbath in Europe, and they tell their populations, you might hate us, you might hate our incompetence, you might hate our elitism. You might hate the fact that we're destroying your culture and importing foreign people to replace you. But if you don't vote for us, it's going to be World War I again. If these same leaders like fight a big trench war in Eastern Europe, such that a noticeable number of European young men are killed, their political formula is broken. How can they ever recover from that? I mean, maybe they'll be able to manufacture a new one, but I don't know. Unlike academic agent, I don't think you can just whip up a political formula. You need to political formulas are organic things. They need to be nurtured and grown from actual organic religious beliefs. Leaders can't just flip them on like some kind of app, right? You can't launch a new political formula, ChatGPT, and it generates a new justification for your power base. I mean, you're going to end up with, if you do that, then you're going to end up with a power base that is comprised solely of boomers and hysterical women. And, hey, maybe hysterical women and old people who are afraid of change is enough in the modern world for you to actually hold on to political power, but it hasn't been in the past. And I can't imagine how such a schizophrenic government could possibly operate effectively. Absolute Defender for $3 USA. Aaron says that Peterson should know better than to work with the ADL. But if Aaron knew Peterson better than this, but if Aaron knew Peterson better, then this wouldn't be surprising at all. Surely Aaron knows this. Like many, he doesn't want to go there. Well, I mean, are you talking about the fact that Jordan Peterson as a Zionist? I mean, I guess we already knew that. I mean, I guess we're talking right now about I mean, this is a gift to us. This ADL thing, of trying to, I mean, even the timing. I can't believe the ADL isn't working for us. I mean, they could, like, maybe they could do this whole Christ is King is hate speech thing. Maybe they could do that in, like, I don't know, August when everyone's on vacation and religion is the furthest thing from their minds. I They keep on doing this, saying Christ is King is hate speech during, like, Lent and Holy Week. This is absolutely the battle we want to fight. Sure, ADL, I'll have this battle with you. The ADL has, for the last 30 years of its existence, been trying to get swaths of the Christian religion declared to be preemptively to be anti-Semitic. I'm sure they would love to label the book of the Gospel according to John as anti-Semitic hate speech. I'm sure they would love to label the prayers for the faithful in the traditional Catholic Mass, where people pray for the perfidious Jews, to be anti Semitic. I'm sure they'd like to declare Christ as King as anti Semitic. I'm sure they'd like to declare the Nicene Creed and the resurrection as anti Semitic. But all that's doing is clarifying what anti Semitic really means, which is, like, anti Semitic is anything that momentarily disadvantages, like, the followers of Talmudic Judaism. Like, that's it. I mean, I have nothing wrong if you're, well, I mean, I do have a huge disagreement with you religiously if you follow Judaism, but I mean, I mean, if once it's clear that anti-Semitism is essentially just, I want to replace your religion in the public square with a bunch of rules that protect my religion from criticism. Once it becomes clear that that's what's going on, which the Crisis King controversy obviously does, then I don't know what there is to say. I mean, I mean, it's clarifying. I mean, what does Joel Berry have to say about that? I mean, Joel Berry is not particularly consistent, but I don't know how any modern evangelical leader can see this controversy and go, "Oh yeah, guys, we need a giant crackdown on saying Christ is King during Lent because the ADL told us to do this." Again, I mean, like, if you're trying, this is what everyone always thinks. This everyone always thinks, and this is such a modern perception. They think that because, like, in their little group chat, they completely control the narrative and they control who gets in and who gets out. That that they can kind of, like, set the frame for things, and they don't have to worry about their own political formula. So they can just put other people on trial, and because they ask the question, like, "Are you racist or are you anti-Semitic?" Then they'll never have to answer, questions coming in the opposite direction that sound like, "Well, are you actually Christian, or do you actually care about Christianity, or why does it seem like you care more about a Christ denying religion than your actual professed Christian faith?" Um, these people, and this is, I think the boomers are particularly guilty of this. So you get on Facebook, and on Facebook, like, you react to news stories with the comments, like, you're interrogating the news story. You don't have a presence as somebody, like, you're literally in the view from nowhere. Like, you're passing your moral judgment behind a wall of anonymity, and, like, you can call everyone ugly, but no one can point through the screen and go, like, you're ugly. Like, anyone right now could just point at me and say, Dave, you're ugly. I certainly look old right now, but I don't know if I look ugly. But maybe I look both old and ugly. But, boomers don't realize this, and apparently a lot of Big Eva doesn't realize this, and apparently the ADL doesn't realize this, and apparently Sam Cedar doesn't realize this, and apparently the European governments that rule the EU don't realize this. But when you're acting online, your own political formula is in the dock. People can turn your own question around and ask back and challenge you. So, I mean, fine. Let's see who wants to hop on board cracking down on saying Christ is King during Lent. I know that if you do that, you're either an enemy or you're a moron. And in either case, you should not be in leadership position. Now, about Jordan Peterson working with the LDL, I mean, we've always known that Jordan Peterson has been very pro-Zionist. I'm not saying you can't be a Zionist if you support the country of Israel. I mean, for I don't know why you would, but if you support the country of Israel, like someone might support the country of Kazakhstan, or you might support the country of Germany or whatever. I mean, I probably would have more reason to support Germany, or at least the German people, against their current government than Jordan Peterson would have to support Israel. But there's nothing wrong with feeling fond feelings for a foreign government as long as it doesn't conflict with your ideas. But we've always known that Jordan Peterson is a Zionist. We always know that he takes his talking points from moderate conservatives, which moderate conservatives' ideas and understandings of the world are dominated. And I don't know why this is. I don't want to insinuate an alternative motive, but regardless of what their motive is, it's transparently clear that your moderate liberal conservative crowd acts like they have a much, much, much greater loyalty to Israel and valuation of Israel's ethnic and religious composition than they do have loyalty to their own native countries or a care of their own native countries' religious and ethnic compositions. That's just a fact. That's what their behavior has demonstrated, and I'm just calling a spade a spade. Maybe their motivations are entirely noble. So Peterson's old. He's sort of set in his ways, and he's kind of following the path of least resistance. That's the reason why. And Peterson's done a lot of good in his time, and I think Aaron's motivation is he doesn't want to hit the guy when he's down. Peterson has not been an agile thinker since his run-in with benzos 4 years ago. His intellectual capacity has noticeably diminished, and at this time, like, beating up against Peterson for repeating things that obviously aren't his own ideas but have been given to him by a handler kind of feels like kicking a man when he's down. So if you're wondering why Aaron hasn't really sunk his teeth into this, that's the reason why. Plus, I mean, I think I along with Aaron McIntyre, you know, other than pointing out the fact that conservatives act like they care a lot more about the Jewish state than their own ethnic states, then other than pointing that fact out, I do not particularly want to get into a conflict with people who are fans of Israel or like Israel a lot, or even, might have explicit loyalties to Israel as long as they're explicitly announced. I have no taste for people who try to subvert people behind closed doors, but I would never make an insinuation like that without incredible evidence, right? And I don't want to stick my hands in casting aspersions on people based on rumors. I think that's it's very unbecoming of somebody who's supposed to be adding sobriety into a conversation. Uh, Christopher Myers for $15 says, "Evening, Dave. I've been continuing to work on building my swing dancing community, but I've been lately interested in the history of European and American partner dancing culture, especially as a courtship institution. Could these kind of traditions play a role in addressing the dating crisis? Yes, but they have to be adopted in the right way." Um, so look, I mean, I'm going to give fairly long answers to all of these questions to encourage more because, oftentimes when I do my lecture podcasts, most people come for the lecture, and I usually take a long time with the lecture, and the questions fall by the wayside. But people have told me this. When I was in college, like I dated in high school, and then I dated after college. But I had this really weird dry spell in dating in college, and it was like a huge source of insecurity for me. So in my last year of college, I had this crazy idea that the way to meet women was partner dancing. And so I took all these classes in swing dancing and waltz and polka and all this stuff. And um I was able to impress one in my 2 or 3 years of doing these dances. I was able to impress one girl, but that's only because we were already dating. The number of women that I had met as that I had known before was 0. This is a horrible way, unless there's, I mean, it is a good way. If you get like professionally good at it, such that you are doing like swing or waltz competitions or tango competitions or what have you, if you're professionally good at it at that level, like at the strictly ballroom level, like that good, like it's a passion of yours. Like you would swing with men just because you're doing the sport. Then, then it become an asset for you to meet women because it demonstrates your value. But if you're doing this to meet women, that like I was, let's be honest, right? And I got a little good at it for a few years there, enough to impress a date that I already had met, and I now thoroughly regret, right? This is the problem with being married is you regret all of your previous dating history, and not just for reasons of religion. You look back on them and realize how terrible they were. But other than impressing one girl that I already met, and it probably was not even important that I do that, it was a horrible thing because it was transparent that I was there to meet women. And once women know that you're doing something to meet them, the value of that thing goes down. So, I mean, this is what you'd have to do in order to make ballroom dancing a place where men and women met each other. You would have to have a male organization that had some business that men thought were valuable without women, like the Old Glory Club, or like, I don't know, Sildings or Beowulf or the Exit Group. I mean, those groups would have to get about 10 times larger than they are right now. But if they got, I mean, that they're 10 times larger than they were 2 years ago. So if we keep on going on that trajectory, you could get there, right? You'd have to have a group of people, of men who were already doing something, who already were doing some business that men are interested for its own purpose and not because there are women there. Then they have to have like a gala or a ball that celebrates like Christmas or the end of year or the anniversary of the organization's founding. And then you go to the wives of all of the members, the senior members, and you go, okay, organize a ballroom dance for an hour or 30 minutes during this gala, and it will be like we're going to resurrect the institution of, and all of the married men in this organization will bring their wives, and we'll have that thing go on to make it look impressive so that it's not embarrassing when no one gets on the dance floor. And then the younger guys who aren't married, they can dance with their dates and impress them with their moves, with the idea that this is an organic extension of something that already exists. This is what, like I said before, you have to do music and dancing for its own sake. You can't do it for the purposes of impressing women. It will incidentally impress women, but you need to love it because it's your love of that thing that's going to impress the women, not the fact that you can grit your teeth and do it. And if women feel like the dance is being put on, so like they can get shoehorned into a dating relationship that maybe wasn't originally their idea, and maybe they're there with a guy that they didn't like anyway, and now all of a sudden the music starts for your little waltz session, and there's like two people on the dance floor, and like the ugly guy that you just said yes to because you wanted to just, like, I don't know, go out on Friday nights, like, bringing you to the floor. That's a really awkward situation. No girl's going to go for it. But if this is like an organic institution, like this always goes on, people are doing this for their own sake. And this is just one of a list of things that's part of this young man's repertoire of skills. Then all of a sudden, it's an entirely different situation. Dances only worked as a means of courtship when those dances were an extension of something that was to exist for its own right. The second you make the dance a forced tool to get people dating is the moment it breaks. So I would say is get people good at swing dancing, uh, join an organization of men, and then put on a swing dance with a bunch of people who are good at that. and then do it for its own sake. And then the guys who don't have dates can invite their own people. And then that looks like it's an organic thing that evolves from the moment and from the organization. And less like you're trying to, women are very sensitive by being forced or trapped into situations where they feel like they have to say yes. But they are very attracted to things that feel like this is an organic expression of something. And the best way to make something an organic expression of a deeper feeling is to actually make it an organic expression of a deeper feeling. So that's my suggestion there. Rusty Shackleford for $3. Dave, thanks for the work you do. Does your ideal bleh. Does your idea of an intentional community involve pursuing wealthy and powerful individuals to contribute infrastructure and sovereignty? Maybe a company town? Well, I mean, that's what the Silicon Valley is doing. They're making company towns. That's their idea of a smart city. And then you've got like the new founding people who are also, I mean, the new founding and exit are two organizations that in their efforts are in the efforts of new founding and exit, they are essentially collecting individuals that are more established, that have resources, that are willing to put investment capital on the table, and that are willing to kind of go deep into fewer projects rather than more like, let's recruit a base of young men. Whereas the OGC is really more like, okay, you're I hate using agentic or high agency, but that's what we kind of mean. You're a high agency 25-year-old who has got good prospects. Let's work together for the future. And of course, you don't have any investment capital at that time, but that's who you are. That's where you're moving and you have more energy. Yeah, intentional communities have to be organized. So at the OGC conference last year, we had a variety of speakers that spoke on like not just like, oh, like I speak like, oh, we should look into intentional communities. Everyone says that, and no one knows what they mean. And but New Founding literally made one this year. Exit Group has been talking about things like this for a year in very discrete terms. In the OGC conference, we had several speakers that outlined exactly the process that you'd go in building an intentional community by establishing an organization, a homeowners organization that owned the property and therefore could control who moved there and who didn't. And if you use the right legal avenues, you can essentially sidestep around the civil rights legislation that prevents like protective covenants from excluding, protected classes from necessarily moving. And that's how you get, Anabaptist communities or Mormon communities, or I'm sure that Orthodox Jews do this too, because they have whole neighborhoods that are only Orthodox Jews in New Jersey. I've driven through them; they're enormous, right? There's no way that that's technically legal, but this is the sidestep, and the details. We went into the details at length, and that's all well and good if you're actually looking to buy property and do this, but the the thing that I remember from those talks were people saying, and this is a continuous theme, you want to make the if you want to have a successful intentional community, you have to make it about working together to build families and have our own property, not like some kind of weird ideological cult. Like, don't do like the right wing version of weird ideological commune where everyone's in a giant long house and doing the same things. I mean, this is a bunch of ideologically aligned property owners that have a common vision for what they want for their children, what they want their community to look like, and who are interested in the value of their property and the value of their lives, and who are invested in that financial product. Not people who want to do some crazy like esoteric fourth position ideology, but right wing. Those things never work because, I mean, they probably work sometimes. I'm sure some kibbutzes have worked like this, but they tend to fall apart over time because they tend to be kind of be grading on, they attract bad actors and they become grading for the productive family members. You need to be the backbone of your community in all other situations. So that's what I have to say about that. Christopher Myers for $15. Evening, Dave. I've been continuing to work. Oh, wait, I've already answered that one. Um, Chandler Baird for $25 says, I've been rereading Carlyle's On Hero Worship and his focus on the sincerity of great men. How can one determine how to cultivate sincerity versus the prudence of hiding power level type discourse? Um, well, I mean, I really like Carlyle's Heroes and Hero Worship. It has gotten, I mean, that book has allowed me to respect Islam and respect Norse paganism, even though I have previously considered those ideologies to be a little bit more on the enemy side. It allowed me to kind of look inside of them and see what drew people to their motivating ethos. And at the core was this understanding of the heroic individual and the individual that had great sincerity and great belief. And the picture that Carlyle poses concerning concerning yeah, sorry about the background noise. The picture he paints concerning Muhammad in particular is really kind of evocative, right? Like, perhaps a madman, but a madman that could command belief, and the emphasis he puts on that. It reminded me of like the Lorgar meme I made a few years ago. Actually, it might have been the direct inspiration for that, as far as I know. I'm kind of disappointed that I don't think Lorgar Aurelian ever said this is a war of belief in the Warhammer series. I think that might have been a Mandela moment for me, but it's something that is is it's good to I think it's a good meme. It's something that I really want to emphasize in my work going forward. Um the the idea of, how should I put this? The sincerity is so there was a debate recently of a Lutheran pastor versus Corey from Stone Choir Loft, and I have been a little bit critical of. I mean, I'm not. I've liked some of their ideas, and I've really disliked some of the Stone Choir Loft's material. And so for me, they're kind of a mixed bag. I think they take some things that are obviously not biblical, and they present them as if they're an extension of the faith when they're just their personal opinions, which I think is like, I guess we all kind of do that. And we all have kind of our crackpot theologies that aren't strictly speaking heretical, but we present them in the way that could be conflated as heresy. And so, I've always considered them kind of a mixed bag. But in this debate, and it was something, this was on LP's channel, he reviewed it. This Missouri Synod Lutheran pastor makes an absolute ass of himself, just an absolute ass of himself, making accusations and then retracting him, using motivated reasoning and then pretending like he's tracked him, and like being smug, and then getting called, then obviously exposing a contradiction in his own thinking. He looks like an absolute moronic ass in the entire thing. And even on points where I disagreed with the Corey, I ended up sympathizing with him in much the same way that Carlyle had me sympathizing with the prophet of Muhammad when he described him in Heroes and Hero Worship, and or Luther for that matter. And the uh, sincerity, and what, okay, I should say, why was that? It was because of Corey's incredible sincerity. And what, regardless of whether he was sincere, or regardless of whether he was correct, sorry, he was sincere regardless of whether he was correct or mistaken. And when we talk about sincerity, we're talking about a quality that the millennials pursued for most of their, I mean, our generation, the millennials, is entering into early middle age at this stage. I certainly look at this stage of my life, but we are entering into early middle age as millennials. And all of our youths have been a pursuit of sincerity, and uh, and a sincere appreciation for This was sort of like we grew up in the age of Gen X and the age of Seinfeld. We all read that David Foster Wallace essay, or the several of them that implicitly talk about sincerity. We all talked about how we were going to develop a new sincerity, and then what happened? Well, our generation is characterized by millennial snot. He's characterized by an even less sincere form of cynical insincerity. And I mean, contrast that with Corey from the Stone Choir Loft. Is he just has this? He says what he means, and he means what he says, and it reminds me of to be sincere. You have to sort of allow yourself to be crucified. You have to put yourself out there and say, this is what Carlyle identifies as the property of Martin Luther. It's more properly the property of Christ. Okay, I might have to mute for a minute. Um, but sorry about the background noise, though. Um, this is this is oh, we're gonna have to get a new living arrangement because it's very very difficult to answer these questions with the background noise. But the property of sorry, Carlyle's property of Luther is the ability to say, "This is where I stand. Judge me if you will." Joan of Arc has a similar moment in this regard. Obviously, they're all modeled on Christ's great moment of heroism, of saying, this is my word and it will stand forever in the face of his accusers. And that's really what sincerity is. It's being at home in your skin and being able to sort of accept your own death for what you are. And the problem with the millennial generation is we wanted sincerity, but we didn't want to expose ourselves to any scrutiny. We didn't want to be on the other side of a moral judgment. So we spent all of our time kind of like trying to do this, like, oh, I'm on the good side. Oh, gee, that's not a good look. Oh man, like all of this like catty camp type talk that, I mean, all what is catty campy talk. All it's like an effeminate way that you can avoid responsibility for your actions. And you don't have to kind of sit there plainly and be comfortable with your skin and your flaws and kind of show yourself to the world and say, this is where I stand. And if that be not good enough to live, then I shall not live. And, be ready to accept the consequences of those actions. To be comfortable with the silence of those moments as well. And I'm not saying that I have this mastered, but I feel like over the years I've gotten kind of closer to that as I've gotten older. And that's the core of sincerity. If you can't do that, you're not going to look sincere. You're not going to be able to have the way of, I mean, you don't have to talk about your power levels. You don't have to talk about something you believe that could be offensive. But at the same time, you don't want to constantly like up talk your way around difficult conversations. You don't want to appeal to an imaginary audience. You don't want to constantly be reframing everything so that you're the invisible judger, judging people from behind the view from nowhere. Everyone else is a moral object, but you're the eternal invisible subject. You just kind of want to hold yourself as you are and kind of speak from the person that you actually are in your skin. There is you know this is something that a lot of people talked about, and someone said you need to feel comfortable in your own skin, and I don't think many millennials feel comfortable in their own skin. And I think that's the beginning of this idea of sincerity. And I think in extreme cases it is essentially what is celebrated in Thomas Carlyle. A ruler 14 for $3 says, "Hey, Mr. Distributist, new reviewer. What are your positions on race? And if you cannot espouse them on YouTube, is there a video where I can find them?" Yeah, there is a video where I talk about like white identity that I made during the George Floyd riots. That's kind of my view on race. I mean, I don't know. What is it? I mean, like, races, it's pretty obvious at this point. I'll just list off, what is your view on race? That's not even really a question, but I could just overview what the my answers to are to on the issues that are usually considered race controversies. First of all, it is exceedingly obvious at this stage that people of different races or ethnicities, which is the same word, and it is very obvious that people's view on race or ethnicity is, um, pardon me, I have to restart that question. My train of thought's totally disrupted. I really apologize for this, guys. Um, Luckily, this is not an official podcast. This is an Ask Me Anything. So, but I'm gonna have to work on getting a time frame where it's easier, I think, what's in a debate, because then I don't have to be, if there's background noise, then I can just mute myself, and I don't have to formulate a sentence and then have it kind of disrupted. But let me start the question over again. So here are my answers about the race issues that are usually considered the controversial racial opinions. So it's very obvious at this stage that for whatever reason, the various races or the various ethnicities are not interchangeable in their behaviors or their ways of socializing or their ways of acting politically, religious, maybe not religiously, politically, or culturally in any meaningful way. And furthermore, that this difference in behavior is not something that modern states can change in a time frame that we would care about. Maybe it's changeable over 500 years, and maybe we should try to change it over 500 years. But modern states don't care about changes that happen over the course of 500 years. And so it's ridiculous to talk about races as if you can just re-educate them to behave like different ones. And you can deracinate people. You can have people, essentially develop a consumer culture, but you're not going to get rid of these differences. Uh, Second issue, it's also highly likely, if you look at modern race science, or that sounds like it's a red flag to some people. If you look at modern genetics and modern statistics about racial groups, and you look at all the ways these behaviors are adjusted, it is very likely that this difference, this irreconcilable difference, is in part due to genetics. And, can we change that? No. It's just an unfortunate reality. Do we know that it's genetics? No. Do we know how much of it's genetics? No. But that's definitely part of the picture, at least if the evidence we have right now is anything to go by. Number three, politics is a collective game, and people's culture and their ability to continue is the people's culture and their ability to have common cultural norms and their ability to have a sense of themselves intergenerationally is dependent on a perpetuating culture that carries over across the generations and that has some consistency, father to son, father to son, father to son. And if you lose that and become deracinated, then immediately your peoples start having no children. People get lost in the morass of modernity, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, so, and that's intimately connected to religion. That's intimately connected to culture. That's intimately connected to race, because we understand issues of race as an extension of people's ethnicities. Now, is it separable intellectually, like on a blackboard? Yes, of course it is. There's a very big difference between culture and heritage in the sort of lineage sense. You can adopt different cultures. People do it all the time. Exceptions exist. And so that's a reality in it. But but I should say before I go on, but while you can make the separation very clear on like a blackboard, you can't separate these things statistically at the larger level. So, Joel Berry can get up and say that he's a cultural chauvinist for European culture all the live long day. He has no way of forcing the population of Nigeria to be European culturally, even though a huge majority or a huge plurality of the population of Nigeria wants to move to the United States. So he can say, like, I am just a cultural chauvinist all the live long day. He will functionally be an ethnic chauvinist just because these things are statistical. And then finally, I don't really have a problem. I mean, I have a problem if people like with racial purity, because I think racial purity is kind of a red herring, or racial categories like continents shift over time. And so it's not really like, is Alexander the Great white is not a meaningful question. It's an anachronistic question because the boundaries of whiteness or whiteness is a modern like racial category, or Europeanness is a modern racial category. It's certainly correct to say that the modern peoples of Europe are highly connected in lineage to Alexander the Great, especially if you come from around Greece, or if you come from Iran even. Um, it's correct to say that like there's a genetic connection there, but applying racial categories across the span of 1,000 years oftentimes does not make sense in the kind of purity sense. It absolutely makes sense when it comes to measuring a genetic line in sort of a vague biblical sense, with the understanding that there are many exceptions, and with the understanding that the categories shift over time. So I think I don't have a problem if people want to marry inside of their group and to sort of preserve their cultural legacy and to make things less confusing for their children. I think we have to be compassionate to the exceptions, and in modern governments, if they want to have their societies live, they have to start respecting the fact that different groups behave differently, and that cultural cohesion and cultural continuation are necessary in order for people not to be completely deracinated and only to be defined in terms of consumeristic culture. The only way you get traditions is by having some level of continuity culturally, which will naturally imply some continuity ethnically. And that does not mean there can't be exceptions or there has to be zero remarriage, but it does mean that you can't do the stupid liberal thing where you just say it's all culture, wave your hands at the problem, and then say that what it means to be an American is how you score on an AP government exam, and then also imply that Nigerians will magically convert their cultures over to that of Western Europe the second they set foot in North America or in Europe, and that's just absolutely nuts. So, I mean, I guess that's not a very nuanced answer on the racial question, but I've been saying those things. I mean, this channel's almost 10 years old. I've been saying those things with those caveats for 10 years. And the problem is that nobody, like, people want to, like, they want you to say something egregiously racist, or I don't believe in racism as an idea, but like they want you to say something egregiously bigoted, or they want you to signal that like you don't care, or you're colorblind, you can't see race, a ridiculous neocon idea, a ridiculous 20th century liberal idea, or they want you to say something that where you profess that your belief in racial purity is your religion, which is an idea that I vehemently oppose. This idea of racial purity itself being a religion, I think this is a heresy, and it's a heresy that I have no time for. And so all my answers on race are always very like filled with exceptions and caveats, and so people don't like my answers on the race questions because of that. But I mean, it's the truth. That's I mean, it's the truth. It is what I say as being the facts on the ground, and the proper application of classical morality and Christian morality to the situation, as best as we can apply it outside of developing a mendicant lifestyle, where we don't have to take direct responsibility over the next generations. Asteroidal Assassin for $3 USA. IQ, while it matters, is overrated. Iran's IQ is 84, and they managed to be the biggest threat against America. Low IQ isn't an excuse. Well, I mean, yeah, Asteroidal Assassin. First of all, I'm not entirely convinced that Iran is one ethnicity, like India. I mean, India is a great example. Like, it's obvious that Brahmins or certain high caste Brahmins have very high IQs, perhaps even very high median IQs, even though the IQ median in India is like rock bottom. right? Uh, so, with these like national average IQs, I'm not so sure how that means in highly diverse nations like Iran or like India. Second of all, IQ is just a proxy. And if the culture behaves very, very differently, then if the culture is from a different is functionally in a pre-modern state, or has a society that looks much more like early modernity and much less like late modernity, then comparisons between IQ measurements have to be taken with a grain of salt. That's just that has to be said right up front. I mean, here's a good Wilford Riley. I was on Wilford Riley's podcast the other day, and um, he was on this week about. I think they published like the Nazi leaders' IQ scores, and they're obviously pretty low, and that's largely because of the Flynn effect, which is because IQ scores have been going up objectively because people. I mean, the reason why is that in the course of our activities in late modernity, we're exposed to more IQ test like problems. And so this is not the first time we've ever seen an association problem. This is not the first time we've ever seen a shape matching problem. So those things, like our brain has more practice with those things. So everyone scores higher on IQ. Um, IQ measurements in between highly different societies don't mean much. The main correlative power are between people who grow up in somewhat similar cultural media environments, and that's where you get the real power on how IQ correlates with G, which correlates with almost all other areas of professional achievement in life. And so you are absolutely right. IQ is just a proxy, and if you break it down for pre-modern, highly diverse societies, and that proxy, then you've officially taken the proxy out of the domain in which it is principally useful. Michael Latorno for $3 says, if Israel goes to war with Iran, couldn't the USA choose to just ignore the conflict and let them fight it out themselves? Um, I mean, yeah, if the United States were intelligent and were making decisions in its own capacity as an actor, it is absolutely in the United States' interest to not fight against Iran. I'll repeat this. It is absolutely not in the interest of the United States to fight against Iran. And if you're a normie Michael Latorno, if you're in the James Lindsay camp, and you believe that you're for America's interest, I might examine some of these conservatives when they try to advocate that the America needs to declare war against Iran in America's interest. It is in Israel's interest for America to go to war against Iran. It is in Israel's interest for that. It is not in America's interest. It is specifically in Benjamin Netanyahu's interest. It is not even in all of Israel's interest for it to go to war against Iran. It's specifically in the political interests of Benjamin Netanyahu for America to have a war with Iran right now. And for some reason, it looks like all of our conservative leaders care a lot about the political fortunes of Benjamin Netanyahu and the political fortunes of the people who run the Mossad. I wonder why that might be. So I don't know, something to think about if you're still in the normie circle. But again, I would just generally look, guys, like I said before, focus on who rules North America, focus on who rules Europe. Don't focus on what the government of the Middle East is going to be. The Middle East is not our immediate concern. No one's going to be nuking each other over the Middle East unless something black swan event happens. This is not going to happen. And yeah, that is I would just recommend that. Just pay attention to the countries of the West. That is what is valuable for us the most anyway. And we need to be able to assert our ability to have power and to hold sovereignty in these nations for the future of our children and for the future of Christian peoples everywhere. Christopher Meyer for $15 USA says, unusual question. I was listening to a based camp video earlier this week about gay conversion therapy. I do love their willingness to tackle weird topics and the viability for gay people to participate in traditional straight marriage and live a virtuous life. Should this be encouraged? Well, unfortunately, Christopher Myers, I have no idea about the particulars of this. Um, so there was a video that came out on YouTube that I didn't watch. I think it was by Peter Boghossian or something like that, and it said, "No child is born trans." I don't think any child is born gay either. I don't think there is definitely like a genetic component to homosexuality, but I think we need to be reevaluating this idea that everyone who's gay was just born this way. There's no way that you can modify your sexual attraction. Every straight man who's ever used pornography knows for a fact that your sexual, I mean, for men, it feels like your sexuality is crystallized. Like women experience a very fluid sexuality, and at least for men looking at women, it's obvious that their sexuality is very, very fluid and very, very based on their emotional state and very, very based on their behaviors and what they expose themselves and what they don't expose themselves to. And as men, you think because this is your experience that your sexuality is very crystallized. You know, you got these feelings during puberty and they've never ever left you. Like you have this consistent feeling or narrative about what you're attracted to. But this is also kind of bullshit. Any straight man who's ever used pornography, I hate to say it's me too, has seen that as you use pornography, your tastes change. You chase certain highs, you follow certain threads. And I think a very similar thing goes on in with gay men too. And so this idea that there is zero environmental impact is really ridiculous. Now, I have no idea how conversion therapy addresses this environmental impact, if they can undo it, if it's even possible to undo. Just because environment causes it does not mean that environment can fix it. That's, a modern fallacy. That's the very fallacy that people like James or people like Joel Berry say when they think that you can culturally assimilate Nigerians to become like French people. It just because their environment gave them Nigerian culture does not mean that you can use a different environment to take that Nigerian culture away from them. And the same thing could be true for um, for homosexuality, right? So I have no idea what it's but we have to get rid of this idea that that people are gay. Like gayness or homosexuality is an activity, not an identity. This is part of my debate with River Page too. Like his whole political project leans on the fact that because people are gay, we can't possibly oppose or turn back any of the victories of the gay movement because that would be perceived as a personal attack on those gay people themselves. The idea of homosexuality being an identity is the problem. And that's the first step on kind of unraveling this. But I can't speak to this particular treatment because I'm a little skeptical myself, to be honest. Christopher Myers for $15 says, follow up to my last question. Say a straight and gay man both get married to a woman and bring children into the world, despite the latter's disgust. They both raise good children, good Christian families, and they are always faithful despite the latter's temptation. Are they both of equal moral character? I mean, yeah, almost. I mean, like, there's the near occasion of sin because thinking about sin is implicitly sinful a little bit. But yeah, I would say in the broad strokes, they are equal. They are of equal moral character because it is the action in which the sin is really embodied. Again, like I said before, there is sort of the Christian idea that thoughts of adultery are themselves adultery, but I think that has to be kind of considered in a second category, and I think the big message is that is an equivalent moral behavior. With also, I think there also something to be said for the fact that overcoming temptation is virtuous in and of itself, and I don't know, I feel it's very difficult to say, you know I don't think anyone can rightfully compare two different individuals with two different inclinations and then, rank them in some kind of ordinal system of virtue. I think that itself is kind of an unchristian or an incorrectly posed question. But in the broad strokes, it is morally equivalent if the actions are morally equivalent. Alex Wegner for $3 says, "Hi Dave, what's the sell for pre-modern what's the sell for pre-modern views? What are its advantages and features? How does it make me feel? Do they spread easily and make the user popular?" Like all of the pre-modern views, like I mean they model human behavior better. I mean, if you're just saying if pre-modern views is any view that is not the post-war consensus, then I guess some pre-modern views make you not look like a clueless boomer. Some pre-modern views give you skepticism so that you don't fall into every pothole, so that you don't send your children to go die in like Israel's war against Iran potentially. These are all these are all problems that seem to trap the modern imagination, but would be very easy for pre-moderns to kind of look at that and say, this is absolutely terrible. Why are we doing this? Are they going to make you immediately more popular in high school? Probably not. The one utility of modern views is that they are very popular among boomers, they're very popular among teenagers, and they're very, very popular among emotional women who tend to have more status in younger groups of people. As Steve Saylor famously pointed out, progressive ideas are the kind of ideas that naturally appeal to people who are in their teenage years. But they're false. And if you're invested in the future and in anything more than just juicing this reality for more hedonism, they're transparently going to lead you into a blind alley and bring you to ruin in the long term. So that's their utility. And it might cost you if you're in a group of people that has, a very, very feminine way of viewing the world, or a very, very young way of viewing the world, or a very, very boomer way of viewing the world. But I mean, are you a political actor or are you trying to be popular? I can't promise you popularity in every single group, but hopefully we're all organizing groups where having these pre-modern ideas is not going to be unpopular. Nervan V-Maker for $10 USA. Thoughts on Oscar Wilde? He was a complete decadent who insisted that his art had no moral meaning. But I feel that Dorian Gray is among the most morally significant works ever written. In particular, it is an insight that the pursuit of beauty in art is not morally uplifting on its own, and is in fact degenerate. I mean, yeah, I think this is a little bit of tongue in cheek, isn't it? I mean, Oscar Wilde, I know he claimed that his work had no moral meaning, but like all men, like all Edwardian men, I think he was Edwardian, right? And then am I using the wrong word for Edwardian? He might have been a little bit later than that, but like all Edwardian men, Oscar Wilde implicitly had like these very Christian themes in them. The picture of Dorian Gray is a Christian morality play about vanity, about pride. it's 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 a perfect Christian morality play. And if you doubt me, I mean, look how many. If I've been a big Oscar Wilde fan, I'm not really. I read Picture of Dorian Gray, The Importance of Being Earnest, and then a bunch of his short stories. But of all the short stories that I've read, I haven't really remembered that many of them. But certainly the one that I remember the most, the Oscar Wilde piece that I remember the most. I didn't even know it was Oscar Wilde when I first came in contact with it. It was The Selfish Giant kids book, and I plan to read it. This is probably the best age for him, is to read it now. And in The Selfish Giant, it is literally a Christian allegory with Christ literally appearing and redeeming the vain giant for his sins. Yeah, I mean, this is I mean, W.H. Auden was like this too, right? These kind of Edwardian degenerates could kind of see a dimension of Christianity and express it very, very well, even if their life didn't line up with that. And that's one of the mysteries of the world. And I hope that they're eventually saved. But that's the reality of it. And I feel a little bit like I feel that a lot of modern gay men, they exploit this by doing the whole like, I am a Christian traditionalist because I am wearing a tweed jacket. I'm gay and I'm wearing a tweed jacket. Therefore, I must be like Oscar Wilde or W.H. Auden or so on and so forth. And I must be somebody who's, while he's gay, he's like a deep insight into Christian morality and Christian aesthetics. And I don't believe that for a second with Andrew Sullivan. I don't doubt that he aspires to be like Oscar Wilde, but he's not there. And this is something that is yeah, I don't know. I really distrust this character that appears in modern gay movements. I feel it's very insincere, and it's not insincere as I think they actually are presenting an aspirational view of themselves, but it's not real. Um, okay, I'm gonna kill this chat because it's distracting me here. Okay. Asteroidal Assassin, when are you going to run for Prime Minister? Well, never, because I'm not a Canadian citizen. Yeah, and I probably won't stay in Canada, based on recent developments. So there's that. Creeper Weirdo for $3 USA. When Trump makes peace between Russia and Ukraine, will you wear a red MAGA hat for a stream or the black MAGA hat for a stream? Big fan of you. Big fat love for you, my guy. Okay. Well, thank you very much. If Trump gets not a ceasefire, but an actual peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine that looks like it's going to draw down the hostilities between those two countries, potentially permanently, I will wear Make America Great Again hat for the stream. I will absolutely do that. I have been praying for an end to this war. And if Trump is the answer to my prayers, I will accept his failures in other dimensions. I really hope he doesn't start another war with Iran and undo all of the humanitarian benefit that would come with a cessation of the war in Ukraine. But nobody listened to me about the war in Ukraine, and it ended up being exactly the catastrophe I thought it would be. And I don't feel vindicated because I don't feel righteous. I just feel horrified and disgusted. And like if he can do that, I will absolutely wear a I will wear a MAGA hat for 2 or 3 streams. I mean, I would vote for Trump if he could stand for election again if he does that. Absolutely. Just symbolically. I mean, I know my vote won't mean anything, but it's worth the symbolism because the ending of that war means so much for me. Okay, so Cataman for $5 USA. JD Vance's speech to the Bureaucrats, blaming them for implementing the things that US soft power forced them to do, was disgusting. What if Farage and such get elected in the EU and shut down illegal but keep legal immigration? Farage says everyone is British. Okay, I fundamentally disagree with the frame of your question, Cataman. Uh, the bureaucrats weren't forced by American soft power. The bureaucrats are American soft power. They are the soft power of Blue America. He has every right. They're not being forced to do this stuff. What is JD Vance going to do? Oh, blink twice. If the State Department has a gun to your head, the people he lectured are there because they want to implement the will of American soft power, because they want to implement the will of the American State Department. That's why they're there. And they're banking on the fact that J.D. Vance and Trump are going to be temporary fixtures of the American political scene, which is not going to be the case. And, well, I don't know. Well, I guess it could be the case. I think that something different is going to happen, but I won't get into that. I can't really comment on the Farage betrayal because I don't really understand the nature of the Farage betrayal. But I mean, look, guys, we just have to get rid of these boomers. This is the same story everywhere. Uh, I'm so tired of cleaning up these boomer misperceptions of the world and walking them through the contradictions again and again and again and again and again. It's the same thing over and over again. There's not even any thought in it anymore. And it's not interesting. I don't even think the audience thinks it's necessarily interesting. I mean, maybe, but we just have to get new leaders into these positions that actually stand up for the interests of the collectives that they represent. Michael Atorno for $3 USA. Some people think that Christ is King is the far right version of Black Lives Matter. Okay. I mean, is there an organization called Christ is King that's cashing checks? Uh, does my workplace give money to the organization called Christ is King? Are my tax dollars going there? Are the representatives from Christ is King LLC using their donations to buy mansions for themselves and to take vacations where they eat lobster legs? Is that what's going on? I mean, I agree. I mean, it's similar in the sense that it's an element of culture jamming. It takes some. I mean, it creates a dynamic where radical elements can kind of identify themselves, and the elements on the opposite side cannot. But really, I don't want to be allies with anybody who will not say Christ is, who doesn't have a good reason to not say Christ is King. Like if you are a Muslim or if you are a Zoroastrian or a deist, and it's like against your religious, you know, conscience to say Christ is King, then fair enough. Like, but that will be on the table, right? I don't want anyone who won't say Christ is King, but then can't tell me why he won't say Christ is King. And if you are coming from a different religious tradition, that has to be on the table as an understood limiting condition of your participation inside the future of Western peoples, in my opinion. Because I think this idea that you know I don't know. It is definitely an element of splitting and an element of culture jamming. That is the commonality between Christ is King and Black Lives Matter, but they're fundamentally different things. And I don't in forcing people to kind of be explicit about their religious belief is just a necessary first step to any meaningful political movement in the 21st century. I'm tired of dealing with actors that are more concerned with not offending the left and progressive sensibilities and liberal sensibilities and Jewish sensibilities, and they aren't actually being loyal to their people, to their faith, to their country. Asteroidal Assassin for $5. You should have seen the disappointment in the Muslim section of the right's reaction to Jordan Peterson's betrayal. The only way he'd receive our forgiveness is if he shows up wearing a turban or calls himself a sheik. Well, I mean, Canadian public intellectuals have a habit of appearing in various ethnic costumes, so I can't say that's totally out of the question. I mean, he's a normie con. Were you really expecting him not to counter signal Islam at some point? And that's obvious. That's what normie cons have been doing for the last 24 years since 9/11. It's been their bread and butter again and again and again. For all the good that's done, we've practically ethnically cleansed the entire Middle East from all of its Christians in the name of fighting radical Islam. And still the normicon has to bash the menace of Islamofascism. Oh my God, the Islamists are going to take over our government and institute Sharia law. Um, uh, this is ridiculous. I'm sorry if Jordan Peterson offended you, but he said plenty of things that have offended me. It's not because he wants to. It's because he's an old guy who's on the backside of a drug addiction that he still has not recovered from and may never recover from. Anonymous for $5 USA. I am Quebecois and thinking about how to rebuild the Catholic community here. Is it better to rebuild the community with just Quebecois people or as a coalition of all European groups, e.g., Italians? I think that you should build up from the religion. That's always how it works. I would not like. I mean, maybe you could try like a dual approach where you've got like a language speaking group of Quebecois, and then you have a group of Quebecois Catholics, which may have some people who don't actually speak Quebec French or French Quebec or whatever that dialect is, French. The whatever they call the French they speak in Quebec. Um, you could do both. For me, it's always the religion that's most important to have straightened out from the beginning. But a near second is the language. So you could try a sort of. I mean, it's been ages. My grandmother actually lived in Quebec, believe it or not, and so I spent a lot of time in Montreal. I can't say I've spoken to many people who were French Canadian there because I was literally spent most of my time in an apartment complex that was like a German ethnic ghetto. but um but that's my impression is I probably would start there. And really, if you're in a European environment, restarting the religion in particular is the most important thing you could do, in my opinion. That is the missing ingredient to make European nationalism really catch fire. They have the cultural thickness, they have the feeling of the collective that the Americans don't have. They just need the family formation and the religion to come in to make that understanding of collective have an imminent expression that's actually meaningful and that actually has eternal spiritual relevance, which is what the religion provides. Not to instrumentalize religion, but I don't know. This question by its frame kind of instrumentalized religion, so I don't know how to answer it outside of that frame. Asteroidal Assassin for $3 USA. This is a question for Christopher Meyer and his swing dancing. Is this like the white guy's only thing? I'm willing to cover myself in flour if that's the case. Well, swing dancing, it wasn't like the Lindy Hop, the black version of the Charleston, and those are both varieties of swing dancing, right? I don't know. I know people who are like experts in Lindy Hop and experts at Charlton and expert at West Coast swing and East Coast swing, but I always thought these were like varieties of the overarching category of swing dancing. And yeah, I don't know. It is certainly not something that was white coded in the early 20th century. It certainly is something that is white coded in the later 20th century. The only two types of dancing I'm aware of that are just like eternally white and have never been anything else but white are waltz and polka. Those have been they're just been white from the inception, and I'm not even aware of a non-white people who have liked waltz or polka. They just like this is an indelible element of European Central European culture. Sean Schaefer for $3 USA. Dave, would you ever go on Pints with Aquinas? Well, I would love it if I had an invitation. It reminds me of the old Dominican stomping grounds, and I love their work. I really do. I don't know if I'm really a Catholic content creator, but I would be honored if they invited me. I have to write a book or something, I feel. Flesh and Spirit for $35 USA. Been thinking about Jung's quote. Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself, or from holding certain views while others find it inadmissible. When I read and listened to this, so many agree. But when I speak to those around me, no one vibes. Well, I mean, this is the whole problem, right? You can find organizations that do things together in a group, but they're all kind of inhabited by this boomer spirit that makes it hard to feel like you're on the same team with them because there's always this separation. That's remember that old song Cheers, which is if you ever listened to the original version, there's a line that's supremely not politically correct. But the line from the Cheers theme song, which is a very good show from the 80s for you Zoomers out there. But, probably like the height of 80s, 90s situation comedy. It's a story about very depressed people at a bar, and somehow it's funny. And it was, for all you Zoomers who like Frasier, it is the show that introduced Frasier Crane to the scene. Frasier is a spin-off show of Cheers. But the famous line from Cheers goes, "You want to go where people know our problems are all the same. You want to go where everyone knows your name." And then, the famous piano refrain there. And, that's what people want in camaraderie and community. And the problem with the boomer perspectives, it's not like we disagree on tax policy. It's not that we disagree on foreign policy, although that's a little bit thornier sometimes. The problem with the boomer perspective and the leftist perspective is that, like, for leftists, everything has to be about them. They're just narcissists. And so there can never be any sharing or mutual appreciation of common values. Our values are 100% misaligned. But for boomers, the problem is like every single problem that we experience in our lives personally, whether if you're a young guy and having a hard time finding your work, or you're trying to find a girlfriend and you can't, or you're a girl and you're trying to get married and there's no one there that's really a prospect, or you're a young parent and you can't find cheap childcare, or there aren't enough parent activities. Boomers have no experience with any of these problems, and their entire worldview has now been dedicated to denying them. And so, yeah, I agree with you on that front. That's a good comment. Sam153 for $25. He says, "Evening, Dave. Since you are now an honorary Canadian, any opinions on Justo's exit and on the new boss, Carney, same as the old boss? Sadly, the Liberals will now win big on the conservative boomers' confusion and lament. P.S. When is the next Black Horse collab?" Well, Black Horse, I always feel like Black Horse is almost kind of like he's the person I always look to for being like one of the main organization people, and I really admire him for that reason. I mean, he's welcome on the channel at any time. But I mean, Carney, this is just like a smokescreen for boomers so that they end up voting liberal again. And I don't know what to say at this stage. Canada, if you vote liberal again, I have no idea what you were expecting to have happen. I have no idea what you are expecting. You want like the Indian immigration rate to temporarily slow down before it speeds up again. This is absolutely insane. I don't know. The thing that shocks me about Canadians is they just they're either, I mean, I don't know. They're good people. They're noble people. And Black Horse is a great guy, but Canadians are just so complacent with this stuff. They are complete pushovers in the face of power. And I don't know what to say. Look, I mean, eventually Canadians are going to have to organize in a political group, and they're going to have to disrupt the Laurentian elite. Right now, apparently, that's not going to happen. Could Trump have played his cards better? Yes, he certainly could have. He bluffed. They called it. And I guess the big winner is the Liberals and the Progressives who want to continue to drive Canada into the ground. But Canadians, like, this is your assets that are being destroyed by this fight. You have to try to break from this pattern. And I don't know how we do it with the boomers still there, but we have to do it eventually. Owen Zaleski, not Zelensky, for $3. Thank you, Owen Zaleski. Hello, Dave. I hope you're well. I asked about advice about creating an art group in my Maryland area. I have gathered a few people that would be part of my art group. What is the next step that you would suggest? Well, other than doing activities having to do with art, you could try hosting an event. If you could get influencers on board, you could. I think that trying to do. We were talking about in our last community stream this last Sunday, which I didn't record, was this idea that we could try to do small events that featured local artists and that allow people to showcase their art and get it and get it into the public eye. I would like to have influencers, and in particular, people who are interviewers and people who are critics like myself engage with artwork more and incorporate friend artwork into their online stuff. I think this is just needed. I The problem is this will require a level of online organization that I'm not sure we have built yet. And so this is what, one of my guests talked about, a sensible esotericist talked about building capacity. There's just a need for sort of an index of creators that we could use to organize this stuff. But if you can link up with the basket weavers in the area, there might be some plans to do that. Certainly, a community of artists is always nice because you can throw parties and everyone loves, well, at least when I was in my 20s, the art people always threw the best parties. They had like, I'm sorry to say this, I'm married, but they had the cutest girls. They had the most interesting conversations. Something weird was always going on. People were usually talking about something cutting edge or interesting or challenging. And I think it's a real possibility to just have really interesting events. And maybe events that break the form of like the basket weaving meetup group. I think we need to branch into different areas here. Ryan G for $20 USA. General advice on becoming a better writer. God bless. Yeah, do more of it. Uh, get a Substack, write material, publish it, circulate it, and then like do collaborations and do collaborations with other people's blogs. People don't know this about Substack, but Substacks are always starving for content. And most Substackers, I haven't had guest writers on my Substack yet, but it's a resolution for myself is to try to figure out a way that I could invite a guest writer onto my Substack. If you have a more popular Substack than someone else who you admire as a writer, you want to invite them on. You want to make friends with other people who are writing in your circles. Then you'll get criticism, you'll get feedback, you'll see what sells and what doesn't. Um, as for style, I mean, there's. I don't exactly know where you are on as a writer. A lot of times, people coming out of the schools have a difficulty with establishing a hook. In when you go to high school or college, you're taught to write in this very dry 5 paragraph essay like, this is my introduction, this is my body, this is my conclusion. So it's prefaced, and whenever I see this in conclusion in big bold and then like the conclusion, that's not how natural expository essays work. They work like a speaker's circle. You catch the audience's attention, you introduce a thesis or question, you digress, and then you come back and answer your question in a complete circle, hopefully in a way that maximally relates to your hook. That's how good writing is done, in my honest opinion. And it's a form that I mastered by doing public speaking. And I haven't mastered writing, but that's my writing is based on public speaking. I was never a good 5 paragraph essay writer. And my whole idea with expository writing is what if I wrote the same way that I thought about these topics inside of a talk? And that's what you get in my essays. It's a little bit more developed. Um, and if you're doing creative writing, just write a lot and write. I mean, I don't know. Write short. If you're doing creative writing, if you're writing poetry, just write a lot of poetry. I like poetry. Most people don't. Uh, Short stories are great for developing yourself as a writer. No one likes reading them in the 20th century or the 21st century. I'd like to change that with like our periodical magazines and so on and so forth, like the Passage Prize. But I can't change the culture of the late 20th century where no one reads short stories, but they do very much help your writing. And you just need to kind of like get your miles in as a creative writer and, write about what you know. And write about what you like reading. What do you like reading? Like start there. I got a lot of my writing techniques from like Chesterton because I liked the way that he wrote. All right, Ben White for $5 says, I befriended an ethnic Ukrainian girl from another Roman Catholic parish. We see eye to eye on many things on religion and politics, but not on the Ukraine war or on the Palestinian conflict. Is this topic even worth bringing up? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You are not, if this is some ethnic predisposition that she has, just avoid it. She's probably getting it from her parents. Unless she's demanding that you like fight on the front lines, this is not your immediate concern, and focus on the things, the elements that you agree on. The question isn't, I mean, I do care about ending the Ukraine war and ending the bloodshed, and it's definitely good to like sympathize with the massive amounts of Ukrainian lives lost. So I would frame it in that way, but always try to frame politics as your ideas. Like you are the person that has political ideas. And all other things are just you agreeing on things. Women do not like political disagreements with their men. And they want to be taught what to believe. Or if they believe something strongly and it's not strong enough to destroy the relationship, like you still agree on baseline values, then you need to avoid that at all costs if you're interested in continuing the relationship. But usually you're looking for religious base value alignment, and then a woman who's interested in learning about your ideas otherwise. And then if she has a few like no-go zones, just stay away from them. That's all I can say. Ben White for $5 USA. After seeing so many Catholics, especially white women, I went to college with turn into shitlubs with okay. After seeing so many Catholics, especially white women, that I went to college with turn into shitlibs with TDS about pro-trans and pro-contraception talking points and pro-GA opinions, I'm extremely paranoid about marrying a woman who turns into this. Help. Well, look, I mean, if you follow my advice previously, make sure you align on fundamental values and then look at her friends group. Is her friend group like filled with these hysterical white women who are obsessed with politics? If it is, I mean, you can kind of try to move her away from her friend group and give her new friends. That's a little bit, that's, I've known men who've been able to successfully do that. They tend to meet older men with a lot more experience. That's kind of a pro move. But if you're looking for a woman who's not going to turn into this, look at her baseline values and then look at her friend group. And if she does have friends that are kind of bordering on shitlib, make sure that she spends more time with you and your friends than she does with them. And then try to get her better friends, because women reflect the opinions of their friend group and the opinions of their men and the opinions of their family. And they very, very few women, I guess very few people, strike out on their own opinion wise. But of the people that do, most of them are men. It's a much, much larger minority of women who actually form opinions that contravene the group that they're a part of. Nerve AMV Maker for $5 USA. I think the fear of war with Iran is overblown. The US doesn't have the internal cohesion to put boots on the ground anywhere. Think of how fast the Iraq war went south, and that was during peak 9/11 patriotism. Nothing like that exists today. Yeah, I mean, the war in Iraq will be like missile strikes and bombing and stuff like that, surgical strikes. It's not going to be boots on the ground. I'm sure Netanyahu would love it if there were boots on the ground. Maximum, you just have like SEAL team operations and stuff like that. That's nothing like Iraq. That's ridiculous. Luke Brasher for $3 USA. Greetings, Dave. I hope things have been going well in Canada with your Asian wife. Okay, we're still doing this. I have an Asian wife. And your family has been doing well during these trying times. Thanks for the content. God bless. Well, thank you very much. I will say thank you to my Asian wife. Charlie Maki for $20 USA. Good evening. I hope you and yours well. Your recent article is excellent. I still need to finish my most recent article, so thank you for reminding me. And I will try to finish my most recent article in addition to another throwaway article in the next week or so. depending on my writing is always dependent on how much time I have. If it's like I didn't get any sleep last night because my kid was up all last night. Like I can't write on 3 hours of sleep after a 10-day work and then, family time, or, I'm using my family time. My Asian wife is allowing me is putting the kid down so I can do this stream. Um, Luke Brasher for $3 USA. What's your perspective on Noam Chomsky? Obviously, he's not our guy and his downsides are obvious. But you see any pros to his thinking or contributions? Any equivalent thinkers on the right? Oh, what would the equivalent of Noam Chomsky be on the right? It's hard to say. I mean, like, what do you mean, like a right winger that's got kooky ideas that's like nonetheless like a phenomenal intellectual? The only one I can think of is like Roger Scruton, I guess, because that he's the only one who had like academic cred. I mean, Noam Chomsky was famous because he had academic cred. He was people some people don't know this, but he was known for his work on natural languages in linguistics. That's what he was known for working on. Then he became like a radical in the 60s, and he was famous because I think his main work had been done in the early 60s or late 50s as a very young man. And then in the 60s, he kind of like joined the party on the student rebellions. And what good things can I say about Noam Chomsky? He was a moralist. He was a true believer. Unlike people who hold Noam Chomsky like ideas in the present age, like Ben Burgess, who's a total cynical ass, who I don't think believes anything he says. And if he does believe it, he certainly doesn't have the balls to defend it. Unlike the modern people who style themselves on Noam Chomsky was a devout believer in progressivism. He was 100% sincere. He was a very intelligent man. His contributions to natural languages, while perhaps not technically true, were an innovative theory that revolutionized the field and that led, coincidentally, to a lot of true discoveries about natural languages. It was a generative line of thinking, which very few people in academia can say that they've founded. And back in the day, back in the 60s, he was a cracker barrel at debate. If you watch him with Noam Chomsky, if you watch him with William F. Buckley, he tools William F. Buckley because it's a very similar dynamic to the Stone Choir Loft guy, Corey Mahler, against the guy from the Lutheran Missouri Synod. Like, he's cool as a cucumber. He knows his facts. He knows his beliefs. He has sincerity on his side, and he just says it like it is. I can totally understand uh, being being somebody from the 70s and 80s who fell in love with Noam Chomsky, the intellectual, as the apotheosis of both their academic ambitions and their political ideology. Now, Noam Chomsky, as someone from the 90s and beyond, is a different story. He has not had a new idea since the 80s. He hasn't done any work in linguistics. And the problem is the people who started liking Noam Chomsky in the 90s and 2000s, they weren't aware of his work. They're just like, oh, hey, here's a smart academic guy who agrees with me and has my politics and has all the right ideas. Therefore, if I develop Noam Chomsky's political ideas, I can be perceived as smart too. Which is like, that's the exact opposite of what Noam Chomsky was in his prime. Noam Chomsky wasn't following I mean, I guess he was to a certain extent, right? But like the professors, while they were left before him, were certainly decidedly less radical. Noam Chomsky in his 20s was like an autistic moralist who just kind of followed his heart. And everyone else who liked him, they were all kind of like modeling this prestige that he has. And now he's just a mouthpiece for voting Democrat. They wheel him out every election year to tell you that you should vote for the party of Nancy Pelosi to avoid a climate change catastrophe that he must know is never coming in his lifetime. I don't know. It's sort of a decline of a thinker. It shows you how something that's so generative in its spring period can kind of be corrupted away, but you can still appreciate, what it was. And, I think, we're never going to have somebody that has the academic cred of Noam Chomsky in the modern world because academics are stopped from being right wing in the way that Noam Chomsky was. But I probably could think of one if I thought about it long enough. Chandler Baird for $20 USA. Regardless of my earlier sincerity question, I find myself trapped between discourse that doesn't boldly claim what is meant with 100 caveats as cultural degenerates into as culture degenerates into harder friend enemy camps. Nuanced takes, while intellectually honest, increasingly seem to be weak and cowardly. Vitality versus sophistication. Well, I don't know. Is my take on race cowardly because it's nuanced? I don't think so. I'm just saying I don't know, man. I mean, the whole theme of this topic. I mean, Noam Chomsky. Look at Noam Chomsky versus William F. Buckley in his debate with him. Noam Chomsky was radical and he was nuanced and he was sincere and he was vital. And I probably agreed more with William F. Buckley than Noam Chomsky. And the same thing is true for Corey Muller. Cool as a cucumber, completely sincere, and has a somewhat nuanced understanding of his ideas, even where I disagree with them. And I do disagree with them in a lot of areas, not least because he's Lutheran. But I mean, this idea that I think this is something that social media, and maybe this is kind of coming apart right now. The way that you are sincere is to have like a really like a vital yelp, like a kind of a slogan that you can shout, and like that's sincere because that's the only thing that can be expressed on social media. I mean, you're not going to get a viral tweet that expresses the theological ideas of like Corey Muller or the political beliefs of Noam Chomsky from 1969. That's not going to be a viral tweet, but it's 100% vital and it's 100% sincere and it's 100% nuanced. I think that, what you're saying is it doesn't play well on social media. And, I can't help you there. But I think that this is one of the reasons why discourse has died on social media is because it's demonstrated that it's fake. And Joel Berry's whole understanding of race is organized around slogans. Like that's what it like Joel Berry and Local Distance's understanding of race is organized around slogans. Uh I'm kind of done with that. I'm kind of done with this. I'm going to come up with a slogan that works on social media and then reason backwards to what the truth is afterwards when I get called out on my bullshit. I'm tired of people doing this. I'm tired of the James Lindsays and Richard Hananis trying to join the winning side and argue backwards to coherency unsuccessfully. It's just a waste of my time. It's such a waste of my time that when I see people kind of glom onto that scene, I immediately think they're trying to waste my time too. Alex Wegner for $3. Hi, Dave. Why don't or can't people believe their lying eyes? Well, that's because your eyes, the establishment of truth is only seen through a moral prism. And so you can't really perceive the facts on the ground without having an ontology of the universe that has a moral valence to it. So if your moral valence is that, science is truth and the science also is the expression of the expert class, then the idea that the expert class collaboratively lied to you about the lab leak theory over the last 5 years, that's not something that your lying eyes can perceive. It has to be minimized as a form of cognitive dissonance because your values are not in accordance with that reality and you can't process what it would mean ultimately. Um uh uh Penultimo for $5 USA. In your last Substack, you explored the idea of corrupting truths. I think it'd be really interesting if you could make a talk about doing a deep dive of your Sphinx quadrant and knowledge of how prevalent they are in current thought. Keep up the great work. Well, thank you very much. I will try to finish the last part of the essay on the blessings of Babel, but I very much appreciate it. I know I don't think like I do think I'm like, could I create a syllabus of errors on stream? Like these are the books that are screwing people up. I mean, yes and no, right? Like for instance, like Nietzsche would obviously be on any reasonable syllabus of errors for teenagers, but Nietzsche is an incredibly important author to read as a mature intellectual thinker. It's just he describes the problem of modernity so succinctly. And so, this is I don't know. I mean, like these info hazards are not so oblique. They can't be kind of categorized so neatly. And that's part of I think what I'm going to try to address in my last part of my uh the last section of that essay. Ben White for $10 USA says, "Have you ever watched Apostolic Majesty's video on Europe's euphemistic democracy? It was enlightening to see. I have not seen that video. It was enlightening to see how many countries don't have a democratic heritage and essentially had it imposed upon them almost like a foreign religion. After European countries lose faith in democracy, what comes next?" Well, that is the thing, right? That is why I think a rediscovery of religion, hopefully Christian, but I guess pagan, even paganism is better than atheism, or even paganism is better than the worship of the demos. Uh, you know, a rebirth of religion is so important because people can't abolish the government of Europe because the government of Europe has become their religion. It's what gives their lives meaning. And this is what sort of Pope Benedict was getting at before he retired with the dictatorship of relativism. He was developing this idea, and then it kind of came to a close, and then we moved into kind of this weird uh, pontificate of Francis that is just confusing for everyone. What's your favorite movie and why? Oh man, that's. I mean, I want to say the last movie that I saw with my father was The Third Man, and that's been that The Third Man and Citizen Kane have been kind of at the top of my list of movies that I've called my favorite movie for the longest time. And I don't know, that's a hard one because they're not very pleasant movies to watch, and they all have really big holes in them. But I have such a sentimental attachment to those movies because of my father. And then there's movies that I really enjoy watching and will always rewatch when they come up, and I wanna watch again and again and again, and, like, I'm a real big fan of David Lynch. I'm a real big fan of the Coen brothers, and, not all of their movies, but it just, like, every time there's a Coen brothers movie and I watch it, I rediscover something different. And I those are really normie examples, and I can't think of anything that's really interesting to put on this list. I mean, like silent movies also are. I've always really liked The Passion of Joan of Arc and the movie M. And wait, was M was not silent? I'm thinking of Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which was silent. Same director, but that was a talkie. Um, yeah, I mean, like I'm a huge fan of those, and I don't know. It's hard because I don't feel that like you could say, "Oh, what's your favorite movie?" Uh, I would have to like narrow it down to like a genre. 2001: Space Odyssey is like a magnificent movie, but it's almost more like a classical music symphony and meditation. It's not really a plot movie. Whereas, Passion of Joan of Arc is like a stage production, right? I feel like these things aren't really the same kind of thing. So, anyway, guys, that's the end of the questions, and I am over time a little bit. I'm going to read a psalm, I suppose, and then we'll end the stream because I wanted this one to be a briefer one. Um, oh, I'm sorry. There's one more. One more super chat here that I almost missed from Penultimo, who's not going to be Penultimo, but will just be the Ultimo. The last super chat, hopefully, if there's another super chat, then Penultimo can be literally his name, the penultimate super chat. Um, when we all know that you hate Scott Pilgrim and Kick Ass, but what are some other movies that you really hate for similar or different reasons? Well, I mean, I really hated, ugh. Well, I mean, I really did hate the Alice in Wonderland movie that I saw in the Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland movie. I really hated that one. Uh, I like. You mean like their millennial creations? The problem is like at a certain point, like I stopped seeing. I could smell these movies from a mile away, and I just didn't see them. Uh, I'm trying to think of it would have to be a movie that everyone liked and I thought was a complete fraud. So maybe like an Academy Award winning movie. Was there anything else like that? An Academy Award movie, like everyone liked it and I hated it. And I'm drawing a blank on this, man. Maybe I could come up with my least favorite movies of all time. But I'm trying to think of a movie that I saw. Like, is there one recently that I really hated? Um, I know, I feel like a similar movie that I like there were a bunch of movies like 500 Days of Summer that I felt like I guess those were kind of good because they were an example of a millennial slice of life movies. I really hated watching them. I felt like dirty watching them. I'm like, this isn't a movie. This is a person complaining about their life, and it resembles mine, which is all the worse. I don't know. I really don't. These questions about movies that maybe I'll do a separate stream on that, but racking my brain over movies that I love and hate is really, really difficult. So I'd have to come up with a list, and that would take time to develop. But thank you, Penultimo. I apologize for not giving you a very good answer for that, but I'm going to go on and read the Psalm. Psalm 34. I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. I will glory in the Lord. Let the afflicted hear and rejoice. Glory of the Lord is with me. Let us exalt in his name together. I sought the Lord and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. The poor man called and the Lord heard him. He saved him out of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Taste and see the Lord is good. Blessed is the Lord. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. Fear the Lord, you, his holy people, for those who fear him lack nothing. The lions may grow weak and hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, my children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Whoever loves your life and desires to see my good days, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from telling lies. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to blot out their name from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The righteous have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from all. He protects all his bones. Those who not of them will be broken. None of them will be broken. Evil will slay the wicked. The foes of the righteous will be condemned. The Lord will rescue his servants. No one takes refuge in him will be condemned. Well, thank you very much for joining me for this Ask Me Anything stream. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and I'll be back with probably more podcast programming in 2 weeks, if not a bunch of live streams having to do with guests in the coming days. But I will wish you good night for now, and bless.